opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Does any member wish to give a notice of a motion? Yes, Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deputy. No, it's not working. It's not working.
Hello.
Hello? No.
Viva, dear, viva.
Hello?
Deputy Speaker. Yes, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker.
Viva, dear. Oh, yeah. No,
One, two. 1, 2.
There we go. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting this House debates the ineffectiveness of the Parliamentary Oversight Authority as a method to exercise proper oversight over Parliament, its executive authority, and the 2.6 billion rand budget. This especially in light of today's cynical and short-sighted move to prevent discussion of several important matters, including the employment of Parliamentary Protection Services personnel and the chauffeuring of a certain high-placed official in Parliament. And that this House examines more effective and proper ways for members of this House to exercise oversight of our Parliament. I so move.
Honorable Maseko. Sorry. Honorable member at the back.
Deputy Speaker, I move on behalf of ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates the hijacking of buildings by illegal occupants, which cost property owners and investors millions of rands. I so move.
Thank you. The member next to you.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. On behalf of the ANC, I move that in its next sitting, the House debates reviving crime-fighting structures in our communities in support of law enforcement agencies. I so move.
Thank you. Honorable member.
On behalf of the ANC, I move I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates progress made in building a caring society based on shared values and vision informed by constitutional democracy, human rights, and equality.
Thank you. Yes, honorable member.
Ngiyabonga sihlalo. Ngithi ngokulandelayo bengiyocela ukuthi CEFF ngiphakamisa ukuthi ke kubheke udaba laba omama base Northwest eRustenburg. Laba abanamakhonyana bakhe ababesebenza emayini abathi mabeshonelwe abakhonyana ukuthola ukuthi mabaphume endlini nabantwana ngale kokubhekelela bengiyocela ukuthi ngelinye ilanga babhekelelwe labantu ukuthi njengomama base South Africa nabo basithole isidima noma isithunzi sokuhlonishwa ukuthi bagxoshwe endlini zabayeni babo nenzilo nabantwana bahamba behla benyuka. Ngiyabonga.
Siyabonga me. Siyabonga.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debates the ongoing political interference by Luthuli House in the administration of Makana Municipality in the Eastern Cape, with particular reference to the appointment process for the municipal manager position and the result this has on service delivery. Thank you.
Honorable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move on behalf of ANC that's in its next sitting. The House debates the strengthening of the partnership between the public and law enforcement agency in the fight against crime and the creation of safer community. I thank you.
Thank you. Yes, honorable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debates the housing project at Marikana meant for the stress mining communities as part of a relief program by the President to validate the effectiveness and the efficiency so that the target community, which consists of mainly mine workers at Marikana, can benefit from it. So I move.
Yes, honorable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, in the next sitting, the House debates ways to overcome the escalating killing of police officers in their line of duty. I thank you.
Thank you. Yes, honorable member.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I rise on behalf of the EFF that in its next meeting, the House debates increasing number of grievances lodged with the Public Service Commission by public servants. I so move.
Thank you, honorable member. Yes, honorable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that in its next sitting, the House debates the acceleration of the 8.5 billion rand investment by Transnet at the Saldanha Bay Harbour over the next 5 years and its contribution to the establishment of the industrial development zone in that area and to contribute to job creation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, honorable member.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I rise on behalf of the EFF that in the next sitting of the House debate the impact of instability and threats of job cuts in the steel industry in South Africa's economy. I so move.
We now move to motions without notice. Are there any motions without notice? Yes, honorable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise on behalf of the EFF to move without notice that the House notes the alarming numbers of unqualified grade R teachers, mostly in townships and rural schools. School phrase that has more than 33% of all learners. Further notes that according to Auditor General, more than 16,000 of total 21,000 grade R teachers are not qualified and competent to be in classrooms. In almost all provinces, half of the teachers do not have qualifications. Acknowledges that Department of Basic Education is the single largest consumer of the national budgets. Condemns the Minister of Basic Education and her department for failing to ensure that such a crucial stage of early childhood development is left to unqualified teachers. Call on the Minister of Basic Education to declare the state of grade R teachers a national crisis which requires urgently intervention. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
ANC object, Deputy Speaker.
Sorry? Okay. There being an objection, the motion falls away. Next motion, NFP.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I move on behalf of the National Freedom Party that this Honourable House notes that prominent anti-apartheid cleric and veteran leader of South Africa's struggle for freedom and democracy, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, was released from hospital on Tuesday after being readmitted for a recurring infection related to treatment for his prostate cancer, and also notes that Archbishop Tutu will continue his recovery at home. And finally notes that the Nobel Peace Laureate retired from public life in 2010, but has kept speaking out in a wide range of issues, including corruption among South Africans' political elite. Wherefore, we call upon this Honorable House to express its joy at the discharge of Archbishop Tutu from hospital and wish him a speedy recovery at home. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. Yes, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. We object.
Okay, the motion is objected to. Any? Yes, Honourable Member. Order, Honourable Members, order. Okay.
Speaker, the DA notes that yesterday South African swimming giant
Honourable Members,
Cameron
please be
Vandenberg
orderly.
sets a new world record for the men's 50-meter breaststroke in the heats at the 16th World Swimming Championships. Also notes that Vandenberg did this by breaking his own world record set at the 2009 championship with a new time of 26.62 seconds. Further notes that Vandenberg is the first male swimmer to set a record at this year's event. Congratulates Cameron Vandenberg for once again flying our flag high on the international stage. Conveys our message of support to the men and women of Team South Africa as they continue to represent their country well at the championships.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. Yes, Honourable Member.
Deputy Speaker, we like Van der Berg, but we object to the motion.
All right. Motion without notice. Yes, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The ANC moves without notice that the House notes that the SADC Double Troika Summit held in Pretoria on Friday, 3 July 2015, reappointed Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa to continue with his facilitation work for peace and stability in the Kingdom of Lesotho, following the killing of Lieutenant General Maporonko Mahau and the fleeing of several opposition leaders to South Africa. Further notes that the renewal of the facilitation mandate also came against background of the tabling and endorsement of Deputy President Ramaphosa's final report on his facilitation process to restore peace and stability in Lesotho in 2014. Recognizes that the 2014 facilitation process culminated in the signing of the Masuru Facilitation Accord, the Masuru Security Accord, and the Electoral Pledge. Acknowledges that the SADC Double Troika also decided to establish a commission of inquiry into the circumstances surrounding the death of Lieutenant General Mahau, while agreeing to send 2 pathologists from South Africa to assist with the post-mortem process, and wishes the Deputy President Ramaphosa well in his renewed task, and calls for stability in the Kingdom of Lesotho, and that the House conveys condolences to the Mahau family, His Majesty the King, and the government of Lesotho.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
Honorable Deputy Chair, we object.
Objected to. Yes, Honourable Mngango.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I hereby move without notice that the House notes that August marks Women's Month, a time to honor the great women who helped mold our country and the trailblazing women who continue to lead the country forward. Further notes that on Saturday, 1st August 2015, a remarkable young woman, the late Gina Lowe, was posthumously honored with a lead South Africa Western Cape Heroes for 2015 award. Recognizes that Ms. Lowe, an organ donation campaigner, has been credited with raising national awareness on this important issue. Further recognizes that an estimated 20,000 South Africans signed up to become organ donors as a direct result of her activism. Applauds the late Ms. Lowe for her bravery and for being a crusader for social change. Further applauds lead South Africa for constantly inspiring and lobbying on all South Africans to make a difference through being active and responsible citizens. Calls on all South Africans to support Women's Month by celebrating the strength and resolve of South African women like Gina Lowe, and by ensuring that we continue to build a South Africa where the rights of women are upheld, honored, and respected. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. Yes, Honourable Member.
Honorable Speaker, we support the organ donor movements, but we object.
Honorable members, order. Honorable members, before I proceed, I would like you to join me in welcoming the pupils and teachers from the Amaria Combined School from Limpopo who are sitting orderly in the gallery there. Welcome to Parliament and enjoy your stay here and in the city and travel safely back. Any more motions without notice? Yes, Honorable Member.
The ANC moves out notice that the House knows with sadness the death of Xolani Nkosi, Premier Senzo Mkulu's bodyguard, who died on Friday, 18th July 2015. Further notes that the 24-year-old Nkosi was found dead with multiple blood wounds at Nkoma Street in Dumisani, Makaya village on Friday. Recalls that Nkosi was a very dedicated protector and was loyal to his work. Believes that his sudden departure is a loss to the government of the province and the nation as a whole, and conveys condolences to the family of Nkosi, relatives and friends, and calls for speedy arrest of the culprits.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. Yes, Honorable Member.
I object.
Okay. All right. Any further motions? Yes, Honorable Member at the back. At the back.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the LFP, I move without notice that this Honorable House knows that this morning in the early hours, a car and a truck collided on the N11 near Ladysmith in KwaZulu-Natal, and also notes that 6 people died in the accident and 3 more were seriously injured, one of which is in a critical condition. Wherefore, we call upon this Honorable House to convey its condolences to the family and loved ones of those who died in the tragic accident and wish those who had been injured a speedy and full recovery. I thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. Yes, Honorable.
Deputy Speaker, road carnage in the country is a worrying sum. It's a worrying sum, it's a matter of national interest. However, we object the motion.
Yes, Honorable Member, the motion falls away.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I hereby move without notice that this House notes that the South African Football Association is yet to establish a professional women's football league. Further notes that SAFA pays Banyana Banyana players up to a maximum of 5,000 per match, while Bafana Bafana players earn up to 60,000 for a win per match. Condemned SAFA for entrenching gender inequality in football through its match fees payment structure. Calls on SAFA to immediately review its match fees for all female national teams. Appeals to all Premier Soccer League and National First Division clubs that don't have women's teams to establish them in order to boost efforts for the Professional Women's Football League. Acknowledges that Banyana Banyana are currently 2 matches away from qualifying for their 2nd Olympic Games. Further acknowledges that the women's under-20 team is currently competing in qualifiers for the 2016 Women's Under-20 World Cup. Wishes both Banyana Banyana and Basitsana well on their respective campaigns for the Rio Olympics and Women's World Cup. Applauds all girls, women and men who are involved in the development of women's football throughout the country. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. Yes,
Objecting, Deputy
Okay.
Speaker.
Motion falls away. Honorable members, I will now invite the Secretary to read the order of the, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Honorable Member, please proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the National Freedom Party, I move without notice that this Honorable House notes that a Sangoma accused of raping 21 girls at his initiation school in Pumalanga in 2012 has been found guilty on 17 counts of rape and 3 counts of sexual assault. And also notes that Johan Jabulani Mlombo, 48, was convicted when he appeared with his wife, Sister Mapalase Koza, in the Nelspruit Circuit Local Division of the Eastern Circuit District Court on Tuesday. And further notes that his wife was also found guilty of 2 counts of common assault and 1 of assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. And finally notes that the victims were girls all aged between 9 and 17. Wherefore we call upon this Honorable House to express its outrage that heinous crimes such as rape could be committed under the guise of culture, and convey its sincere wishes for a speedy recovery for the victims from the psychological and physical harm which they had suffered, and urge the Nelspruit Circuit Local Division of the Eastern Circuit District Court to impose the harshest suitable sentence on the convicted Sangoma and his wife. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
Deputy Speaker,
Yes.
we really abhor and detest rape. However, we object the motion. Rape is a very wrong thing. Anybody who rapes must go rot in jail. But we reject, we object the motion. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Chief. Order. Honorable Member, take your seat. Honorable Member. Honorable Member, take your seat there.
Deputy Speaker, if we're going to turn every single debate, every single motion into a debate, we're going to be here all night. All that's required of members in terms of precedent and procedure is to say, I object. It doesn't become a debate. People want this to be a debate, they must get their motion passed and we can have a debate about it. But we can't have reasons given every single time that there is a opposition.
Okay.
But
Honorable members,
Speaker,
do you have... Yes, Honorable Member.
On the same note, if you may, please.
Yes, Honorable Member.
It makes a mockery for all of us to engage in this exercise when one party, the EFF, is going to object to serious matters or in the public domain, including all of us wishing wishing Archbishop Tutu well. And here's one party that objects to everything. What is then the purpose of us engaging on this matter?
Honorable Member, hold on. Yes, Honorable Member.
The ANC members, I just want to remind you, Honorable Chair, that in the last sitting, I raised a very serious point about people of Sikukuni not having water. The ANC rejected. So you are not better than anybody here.
Honorable members, order please. I want to proceed on the understanding
On a point of order, Speaker.
What's the point of order,
I
Honorable
think
Member?
it's important that you clarify that we're not going to be told by DA or ANC what to do here. We know what to do.
That's a point of debate, it's not a point of order.
They're not going to tell us
It's not
what
a
to
point
do
of
here.
order. Please. Honorable members, I am proceeding. What? Is that a motion without notice? Proceed, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move without notice on behalf of the economic freedom fighters that the tragic and unfortunate remarks made by the President of COSATU on Tuesday, the 4th of August, where he attacked the judiciary and labeled it a threat to democracy. Further note that these remarks were made just after the Polokwane High Court made a decision to strike off the roll the case against the Commander-in-Chief and the future President of this country, President Julius Malema. Acknowledges that COSATU is one of the tripartite alliance partners and that together with the ANC and the SACP have been launching one attack after another on the institution of state that are meant to be safeguarding our democracy and upholding the rule of law. Further acknowledges that the attack on the judiciary by ANC alliance partners came just few hours after the Polokwane High Court declared the commander-in-chief and the future president of this country cleared of all the charges. We condemn the unmitigated attack on the judiciary by the ANC and its alliance partners, threatening the foundations of democracy Nelson Mandela and others fought for. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
ANC objects. Deputy Speaker.
Objected to motion. Okay. Motion falls away. Honorable members, we now move to the next order of the day, which is the Secretary will read the order of the day.
Debate on International Mandela Day, entrenching former President Nelson Mandela's legacy of dedicated and selfless service to building a socially inclusive society.
Honorable the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, L.T. Landers.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members of the House, respected and esteemed members of the Mandela family, comrades and friends, today we celebrate a living legacy, one that calls on us not merely to reflect on a life well lived, a struggle well fought, and the triumphant fulfillment of a dream. The legacy of Nelson Mandela, which we celebrate today, calls on us to reflect, mobilize, and engage in revolutionary action so that every human being in the world may enjoy social justice and peace. On this day, 53 years ago, on the 5th of August, 1962, Nelson Mandela was arrested near Howick. On 11 February 1990, 28 years later, he walked from Victor Verster prison, a free man. On 9 May 1994, he was inaugurated as the first president of a democratic South Africa, and on the 5th of December 2013, he passed on peacefully. Nelson Mandela's legacy was the epitome of the four cardinal virtues of prudence, temperance, fortitude, and justice. Our great leader, Nkosi Albert Luthuli, describes fortitude as courage that rises with danger as well as justice. The medieval sage Aristotle described justice as the equal treatment of equals and the unequal treatment of unequals. Nelson Mandela's legacy teaches us that humanity is one, and that in a country such as ours with a history of unfair discrimination, fair discrimination is an antidote against the legacy of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. This calls on us in our second phase of transition towards our national democratic society to commit to more fundamental restorative justice. Honorable Deputy Speaker, if we were to ask Nelson Mandela today what he would want his legacy to be, he would perhaps undoubtedly answer with the words from his inauguration speech when he said, and I quote, "Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. Our daily deeds as ordinary South Africans must produce an actual South African reality that will reinforce humanity's belief in justice, strengthen its confidence in the nobility of the human soul, and sustain all our hopes for a glorious life for all. All this we owe both to ourselves and to the people of the world," close quotes. In the face of such an historic commitment, can we ever abandon the ideal of social justice and world peace? Nelson Mandela lived and died by that belief, so articulately expressed by Comrade Che Guevara when he said, and I quote, "As long as there is a single human being suffering anywhere in the world, our struggle cannot be over," close quote. We would be failing in our responsibility if, To paraphrase Madiba's words, in our daily deeds as ordinary South Africans, we do not produce an actual South African and indeed global reality that will reinforce humanity's belief in justice. Nelson Mandela's legacy calls on us to reflect how much we devote to achieving social justice and world peace. As a nation, we must lead by example and mobilize the goodwill and outpouring of the world in celebrating Madiba's legacy. We must plant the seeds, ask the questions, and take the actions that change the global discourse and reality. Mandela's legacy calls upon us to refocus humanity's attention on making a fundamental difference in the lives of the 2.2 billion people in the world that lived in dire poverty on less than $2 a day. We must rally the nations of the world to address the reality of 60 million people who have been driven from their homes by violence. That is akin to the entire South African population being driven out of our beloved country. Madiba's legacy requires us to tell the world that the children and women languishing in refugee camps, sometimes in the most squalid conditions, stripped of their dignity and facing an assault on their humanity, deserve better. Madiba's legacy calls upon us to address the plight of 775 million people in the world who are illiterate, with another 152 million children set to follow in their footsteps because they aren't attending school. We must be brutally honest with ourselves and see how far we have come, what the challenges are, and what must be done. If we fail to do so, we will be guilty of a gross neglect of our historical responsibility. As we celebrate Nelson Mandela's life, we must also commit to the values that he instilled in us and live to honor and cherish these values. We are deeply humbled and honored to have learned these lessons from his illustrious life, and today we must pledge to draw on the fountain of Madiba's wisdom. He fought a good battle. He emerged victorious. Madiba has played his part. Now we must play our part in uniting humanity. Victory remains certain. Together, we must strive for the creation of a humane and better Africa and better world, and ensure that South Africa's post-apartheid foreign policy continues to be guided by the principles that Mandela believed in, including, amongst others, 1, a belief in human rights which extends beyond the political, embracing the economic, social, and environmental issues. 2, a belief that just and lasting solutions to the problems of humankind can only come through the promotion of democracy worldwide. 3, a belief that justice and international law should guide the relations between nations. 5, a belief that international peace is the goal to which all nations should strive. Where this breaks down, internationally agreed upon peaceful mechanisms to solve conflicts should be resorted to. 6, a belief that our foreign policy should reflect the interests of the continent of Africa. And 7, a belief that South Africa's economic development depends on growing regional and international economic cooperation in an independent world. And finally, a belief that our foreign relations must mirror our deep commitment to the consolidation of a democratic South Africa. Deputy Speaker, Nelson Mandela remained committed to the international policies perspectives that informed the anti-apartheid struggle for decades. That is, international human solidarity with oppressed, downtrodden, and poor. These principles form the bedrock of our foreign policy over the past 2 decades. Today, it remains embedded in our policies, programs, and engagements with institutions of global governance, multilateral and relations, and the global solidarity network of activists working and advocating for a vision of a world in which there is social justice, peace, and dignity for all. Madiba never feared the opprobrium of global powers and spoke truth to power with conviction. He was principled on his stand on Cuba, Western Sahara, Iran, and Palestine. Today, that position on Cuba has been vindicated, and perhaps tomorrow there will be a just, peaceful, and dignified future for all Palestinians. Mandela dared to tell the world that the greatest moral issue of our time is Palestine. He dared to call for the right of return of 5 million Palestinian refugees, and he dared to call for a peaceful settlement and the right to coexistence and self-determination for Palestinians and Israelis alike. Had he been alive today, Madiba would challenge all of us to be torchbearers and advocates for social justice and to strive for an end to discrimination based on class, gender, and race. The vision of a prosperous and peaceful South Africa is a vision that Madiba also desired for the rest of the world. In the same way we wish for a continent which is more at peace with itself, our wish for the world is peace, prosperity, and development. Such a wish cannot be fulfilled through part-time activism. We must commit to leveraging our 67 minutes of activism to a greater commitment from the remaining 526,433 minutes in the year. Tata Madiba's legacy and example calls upon us to commit to a lifelong struggle. Only when we forge such a global alliance for social justice and peace can we consider ourselves worthy of the cause to which he devoted his life and for which he was prepared to die. In conclusion, the 2015 Global Peace Index says, and I quote, "If it seems like the world is getting more violent at the moment, that's not just an illusion. It seems the world has become less peaceful over the last 8 years, after a sustained period of improved stability after the Cold War," close quote. What would Madiba do in the face of such an assault on social justice and world peace? I believe his response to such a question was quite forthright when he said, and I quote, "It is time for the next generation to continue our struggle against social injustices for the rights of humanity. It is in our hands," close quotes. Dalibunga.
The Honorable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Deputy Speaker, honorable members, lelapa la kwa Nelson Mandela, bagaetsho dumelang. In 1994, speaking from the dock in the Rivonia trial, Tata Mandela expressed his dream for a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony with equal opportunities. This was an ideal for which he was prepared to die. But the South Africa of today is not the South Africa Tata Nelson Mandela dreamt of. And in fact, the ANC of today is not the ANC of Tata Nelson Mandela. Madiba set an example for all South Africans through his selfless dedication to building an inclusive nation. On his inauguration as the first democratically elected president of the Republic, Madiba brought a message of hope and reconciliation with the following words: "The time for the healing of the wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasm that divides us has come. The time to build is upon us." The divisive system of apartheid denied millions of South Africans access to opportunities and left us with a legacy of racial inequality. More than that, it denied South Africans their dignity and humanity. But in 1994, we took a bold step as a nation to embrace Madiba's dream for a rainbow nation at peace with itself and with the world, and build an inclusive and a non-racial South Africa where the rights of individuals are upheld. As we celebrate Madiba's legacy today, we must acknowledge that that dream is far from being realized. No one can deny that we've come a long way as a nation over the past 21 years, but the successes we've achieved must be measured against the benchmark of Madiba's vision for our country. While Madiba's dream was given power in the preamble of our Constitution through a commitment to improving the quality of life of all citizens and freeing the potential of each person, President Jacob Zuma's government has not honored that commitment. Today, our society is characterized by corruption and a benefit for some at the expense of the many. Empowerment programs aimed at economic inclusivity have only resulted in the enrichment of those who are politically connected, while leaving the vast majority of poor South Africans without the opportunity to pursue the life they value. Whilst, in fact, honorable members, we have a bloated cabinet that could not be bothered to attend this sitting and debate Tatu Madiba's legacy, costs almost all of us as South Africans R500 million a year. Schools like Mekhatong in Soweto still don't have basic services or basic sanitation. Children at Mekhatong are expected to learn in the most deplorable conditions, denying them their basic right to a quality education. Madiba once said, "We are not yet free, we have merely achieved the freedom to be free." He understood that building a strong economy is a basic requirement to building an inclusive South Africa. He understood that our people needed a freedom they can use. Unemployment and racial inequality continue to divide us as a nation and threaten to prevent us from fulfilling Madiba's dream. An equitable, prosperous society can only be made possible by economic growth that creates jobs for South Africans, millions of jobs and opportunities for South Africans that have been left out. But instead, we face an economic crisis that sees 1 in 3 South Africans left without work. These South Africans are not only being denied an opportunity to create a living, but they're being denied a chance to pursue their dreams and a life they value. No one has been affected more by this crisis, by the young people in our country, where 2 in 3 young South Africans are unemployed. 70% of these are black South African youth. Economic growth over the last 5 years has averaged out at less than 2%, far below the required level to bring about meaningful change to the economic structure of our society. But despite the progress we've made, those who have been referred as the born-frees remain changed through the legacy of the past. But this is not an accident of nature. It's fundamentally because of the inconsistent policies, poor economic infrastructure, and rent-seeking behavior by those who are connected to the ruling elite and the ANC itself. Honorable members, the truth is, President Jacob Zuma's ANC is not the ANC of Nelson Mandela. Madiba had an unwavering respect for the Constitution and the rule of law and set an example to all South Africans to honor its founding principles. He fought for a society under which everyone is equal before the law. In fact, when he was taken to court, President Nelson Mandela deferred to the court subpoena out of respect for the administration of justice and the rule of law. Yet the ANC of today has long forgotten this example and undermined the supreme law of the land to suit their own personal and self-enrichment interests. President Jacob Zuma has disregarded the rule of law for our courts and ignored institutions such as the public protector, and ultimately uses his office and our taxes to protect himself from accountability. Utatu Madiba said that the human rights should be the light that guides our foreign policy. Yet, President Zuma's executive was complicit in allowing Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, a wanted war criminal, someone who's committed genocide, to escape South Africa in violation of both international and domestic law and a direct high court order. But instead of defending our constitution, Luthuli House and its allies criticized the judiciary and for their overreach in making judgments against the state. President Jacob Zuma may have given up on the constitution, but I want to say this, honorable members, the Democratic Alliance has not. We will fight to debate a motion to remove President Jacob Zuma from office for his failure to uphold the law of this land as his duty it is as the Republic. Honorable members, in May this year, the Democratic Alliance adopted into our values charters values based on freedom, fairness, and opportunities. These values guide our vision for South Africa, the foundation upon which we believe freedom without opportunity to pursue a life one values is not freedom at all. It is only when each and every South African is empowered to pursue their dreams and realize their potential that we'll be able to bridge the chasms that divide us. In order to build an inclusive society, we must break down the correlation between race and wealth that are a product of our bitter history of apartheid. In fact, to use the words of Robert Sobukwe, there should only be one race, and it is the human race. That is the dream that Madiba had for our nation. In order to build a truly inclusive society, we must ensure that the child born in Soweto is not faced with the greater challenges to succeed than a child born in Sandton. This is the vision that the DA has for South Africa. It is a vision for a country where we have a competent state, free from corruption, that will empower all South Africans with an opportunity to live a life they value. And it is fundamentally a vision for society where reward is aligned to effort, where all South Africans who work hard and play by the rules will be able to achieve their dreams. Honorable members, I believe in honor of the legacy of President Nelson Mandela, we must and we can get South Africa working. We can stop the rot of the economy that has occurred under President Zuma and break the trend of a rising unemployment. We can get our youth working by equipping them with skills needed to find a job through an effective education system. This, honorable members, requires competent teachers, principals that are dedicated to the cause of teaching, not to the unions that employ them. We can incentivize their employment through a real wage subsidy. We can ensure that our energy sector is working by opening up the market to private power producers instead of investing money in a 1 trillion rands nuclear deal that South Africans cannot afford. South Africa's potential is waiting to be unlocked, but it's been held back by a corrupt government that favors the enrichment of a select few and an empowerment of a few at the expense of many millions of entrepreneurs. Honorable members, let us get South Africa working if we are to uphold Madiba's dream. We have to cut red tape. We have to ensure owners of small and micro enterprise to become the engine room of our economy. We have to ensure, Deputy Chair, that as President Mandela said on the occasion of his inauguration, that we have at last achieved political emancipation. Our challenge now is to give power to this political emancipation by achieving our social and economic emancipation. South Africans share a desire for a brighter future. It is a desire that motivates millions of parents who travel hours to work to give their children opportunities they were denied. And it is a desire that motivates the millions of children who walk tens of kilometers to get to school, to get an education that will empower them to find a job and support their family. I believe in the spirit of South African people. I believe that Madiba's dream of a rainbow nation is alive and well, and I believe that South Africans are willing to work to see that it is achieved. But more than anything, Madiba believed in democracy. In order that his dream must be achieved, we must honor the basic principle and elect a government that cares for a people more than it cares about itself. We must elect a government that will restore the supremacy of our constitution and realize the potential of our economy. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, Utatu Madiba will always be a member of the ANC, but what is truth is that his values are no longer in the ANC. They will be with the party on my left.
Can the member take a question? Can you take a question?
No.
He's the leader of the opposition. I think he can take a question.
Honorable member, you had no right to speak before you were recognized. Please take your seat. Yeah. You've got 30 seconds left, Ndati.
The dream that Utatu Nelson Mandela is for one where South Africa is working, and ultimately that dream can only be realized.
Member, please take your seat. What's your question? No, not what are you rising on, honorable member?
Thank you. Can the honorable leader of the opposition take a question?
Sorry, I've run out of time, but here's what I'll respond to. is that when the DA governs here in provinces and in cities next year and soon governs South Africa, perhaps I'll be able to take your question, for that dream is the change of democracy that President Nelson Mandela dreamt of. I thank you very, very much.
Honorable members, Honorable Mhlongo. Honorable Mhlongo is his maiden speech.
Deputy Speaker, honorable members, fellow South Africans. The 1870 Berlin Conference held under chairmanship of Bismarck on what was later known as Scramble for Africa and subsequent all-white South African Union formation in 1910 in South Africa prompted Dr. Pixley Isakaseme to say the following, I quote, "For us as Africans to win this war of exclusion, we need warriors." A warrior Seme spoke of in 1910 was born in Nelson Mandela, who changed political discourse of our country. Here I speak of President Nelson Mandela, the first commander-in-chief of our Umkhonto weSizwe, those of us who fought in the trenches of war, first volunteer-in-chief and accused number one in the Rivonia trial, and a peacemaker when conditions became favorable for change of tactic, and finally a man of nobility, free from corrupt tendencies that are actually rocking our nation today. It is upon this backdrop that economic freedom fighters has presented before you, fellow South Africans, 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars aimed at intervening to crisis we face post-political liberation of our country in 1994. Thanks once more to our CIC and our Central Command team members for reinstating lost hope to millions of our people, not only here at home, but also in the continent, Africa as a whole. This act is in line with the generation of President Nelson Mandela, who could not betray his generation and national interests of his generation to lead comfortable life whilst his people faced an uphill mountain of repression and dispossession. Our mission is to ensure that workers of Transnet in Durban Port, the widowers who were mowed down by the democratic government in Marikana, the people of Emandlovini in Greytown, whose land cannot be brought back to their hands because of family members of the current sitting president of our country, who are interfering with the process, and all our people who sleep without food today, they are free from chains of being slaves of poverty. This has been demonstrated once more by the capable leadership of our President Julius Malema when he commanded all of us, together with the entire Central Command team, during our first rally campaign in the Northwest, when we visited the family of late Comrade Mos Phakwe, who died in the hands of members of his own party, the ANC, for having raised serious elements of corruption. This is what President Julius Malema said to the family. We cannot allow the children of Mos Phakwe to go without shelter and food whilst economic freedom fighters live. And as a result, 100,000 rand was committed to the family of Mos Phakwe so that kids would actually then keep the shelter over their heads. And the continuous negotiations with the exploitative banks are underway.
Honorable Mhlongo, your time, unfortunately, has ended.
Kodwa
Honorable
Siyethemba ukuthi abanezindlebe bazwile.
Buthelezi.
Amathambo afile ngeke ke sikwazi ukwavusa
Honorable
bakithi.
Mhlongo,
Siyabonga.
please, your time has expired here. Honorable Buthelezi. Honorable members, please complete your induction, please.
Honorable Deputy Speaker,
Order, order.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Deputy Ministers, and Honorable Members of the Assembly. On the 18th of July, as the world celebrated Nelson Mandela's International Day, people across the globe were reminded not only of the life of a South African icon, but of his words and how what he said resonated beyond our nation to speak to the hearts of many. Let's remember some of those words today and ask ourselves whether we're still living the legacy of our first democratic president. Nelson Mandela said, and I quote him, "It is easy to break down and destroy. The heroes are those who make peace and build," unquote. Our focus was once wholly on reconciliation. Where is our focus now? Mandela said, and I quote him, "A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones," unquote. I fear that some among our nation's leaders believe South Africa is doing well because a few are richer and a few have greater opportunities than they had before. In truth, Honorable Deputy Speaker, we still have a long way to go and will be hindered on our journey for as long as our corruption endures. Mandela spoke frankly when he lamented, and I quote him, "Little did we suspect that our own people, when they got a chance, would be as corrupt as the apartheid regime. That is one of the things that has really hurt us," unquote. Let us not shrink from remembering his sharpest words while we embrace his gentler ones. He often said not what people expected, but what had to be said. Consider, for example, on the 25th of February 1990, the thousands gathered at Kings Park Stadium in Durban expected Mandela to sanction revenge. Instead, he said, quote, "Take your guns, your knives, and your pangas and throw them into the sea," unquote. For years, he and I sought to end the violence between our people. We had corresponded throughout his imprisonment, and in his last letter to me in 1989, before his release, he highlighted reconciliation as a fundamental priority. Regrettably, reconciliation between the IFA and the ANC was not completed in Mandela's lifetime. What better way to honor his legacy than by resuming that unfinished agenda? Years after his presidency, and many years after his party's campaign of propaganda against me, when he owned up that they had used all sorts of ammunition to destroy me, but failed.
Honorable
Mandela
Schengen,
warned
your time
that
has
Mangosuthu
expired.
Buthelezi, a leader we cannot ignore. Will Mandela's words have resonance in the South Africa of tomorrow?
Honorable Buthelezi,
The
I'm
South
afraid
Africa
your
we're
time has
creating
expired, sir.
through our present deeds. Dalibunga.
Honorable Mncwabe.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, the Mandela family, honorable members. As it has been said, Deputy Speaker, here that on this day, the 5th of August, in 1962, President Mandela was arrested outside Howick in KwaZulu-Natal, and thus started his 27 years of political incarceration. It is therefore fitting that we should have this debate today to honor and pay tribute to the struggling icon and the father of our democracy. For 67 years, the late President Mandela devoted his life to the service of humanity. As a human rights lawyer, a prisoner of conscience, an international peacemaker, and the first democratically elected president of a free and democratic South Africa. In November 2009, the United Nations General Assembly declared the 18th July to be Nelson Mandela International Day. Through participation in International Mandela Day, the world acknowledges his contribution to the struggle for democracy internationally and the promotion of culture of peace throughout the world. As South Africans, we are fortunate and blessed to have his legacy to guide us. Many young South Africans have recently started branding President Mandela as a sellout for negotiating a peaceful transmission to democracy, rather than a revolutionary overthrow of the apartheid regime, which would have in fact reduced our beloved country to ashes. Yet none of those who call him derogatory names knows what it feels like to be imprisoned for your beliefs. None of them knows of daily hunger and meagre prison rations, of hard labor and heartache, of not being able to bury your firstborn with the cultural rights required of a father. None of them know the etching love for your wife, whom you could not embrace, but only speak to her through a screen of wire mesh in the presence of a prison warder. Despite all this hardship, President Mandela remained true to his conscience. He refused conditional release by the apartheid regime with words, and I quote, "Prisoners cannot enter into contracts. Only free men can negotiate," unquote. After 27 years of sacrificing his freedom for the ideal of a free and democratic South Africa, President Mandela finally walked free on the 12th of February 1990. This, Deputy Speaker, is a moral giant we speak of today, the man we honor today. Finally, on a personal note, Deputy Speaker, as a young South African, I'm free today. I have an opportunities today. I have a future which is filled with promise and challenges. As a young South African, I said thank you to President Mandela and all those who suffered and sacrificed so much. On their shoulders, I stand today and look ahead to the future, and I see that the long walk to freedom which
Honourable
President
Member,
Mandela and others had walked,
your time
filled
has
with
expired.
footprints of blood and heartache, was a path which he walked for me too. Atalipunga.
Honorable Holomisa.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and honorable members, this debate reminds me of a haunting question that Madiba asked me in the early 90s, and the question was, Bantu, what happened to all the birds that used to inhabit this place? This question would have been occasioned by an acknowledgement that even in the most remote rural areas, the morning enjoyment of the tranquility of nature, the harmonious sounds of the birds, their beautiful singing has long gone. Poverty, against which Mandela dedicated the entirety of his life fighting to defeat, has forced people to continue resorting to trees as wood to make fire, to cook and keep warm, resulting to the destruction of the natural forests. Today, we are confronted by a life-threatening global warming, the lack of production of food through home-based gardening, which cause hunger, unhealthy environment, and unsustainable livelihood. Indeed, with Nelson Mandela having fought and served to build a socially inclusive and sustainable global society, the 67 minutes we contribute to this good cause would seem appropriate way to honor the legacy of this icon of our time. But more can still be done for 365 days. In this regard, I propose that we consider an international project to restore the tranquility of the nature, This means launching global reforestation programs together with food production gardens in every household in the world. To be conclusive on this proposal, it may be termed a Nelson Mandela Forests and Gardens, in which case the nation that gave birth to this great patriot, South Africa, may lead the international community by starting with its own chapter. In conclusion, in our country, this initiative will go a long way to address historical consequences of an environment that was deliberately designed along the racial lines while creating more opportunities for jobs. Equally important is that such an approach will also instill a culture of participation and ownership which our constitutional democracy requires. And goes.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable G.W. Korenhoff.
Deputy Speaker, honorable members, despite a petty party political rhetoric by one speaker here before me, which are totally unsubstantiated and untrue, all political parties, including the leader of the official opposition, claim part of Madiba today. And that's good. When Madiba died, every single president and prime minister claimed Madiba. And that is excellent, because the ANC produced Mandela, and the ANC produced similar excellent international leaders. Madiba transcends all boundaries and divisions, and that's what we should do, including all political parties here, because he had national interests at heart of nation building and reconciliation. So for me, this is a positive input by all the political parties to claim Madiba as a victory, and that is going forward. Deputy Speaker, on the 5th of December 2013, a giant baobab fell. In breaking the news of the passing of Nelson Mandela, President Jacob Zuma correctly captured our profound loss, asserting that, I quote, "Our nation has lost its greatest son. Our people have lost a father," unquote. In coming to terms with our collective grief, our people said, "Ayo hamba, amakwawe, kuya sale ibongo." Indeed, the deeds of those who are committed to servant leadership live forever. When we evoke Madiba's name, we call that he was indoda emadodeni, a man amongst men. Described by Oliver Tambo in the 60s as unrelenting, yet capable of flexibility and delicate judgment, his legacy lives beyond the grave. He does so as we recall that he and his comrades were prepared to pay the ultimate price to ensure that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. At the cost of great personal suffering and pain, they remain steadfast, principled, and consistently committed to the ideal of a just, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic society. Madiba lives eternally in our hearts for succeeding to lead and deliver a peaceful transition at a delicate period in our history where our country was on the verge of descending into a protracted civil war, a war against our own people. Convinced that national unity, reconstruction, and development was urgent, and believing that one can achieve more through acts of mercy than through vengeance, he strongly advocated for the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The process of repairing and healing of the wounds began as victims of gross human rights violation, and perpetrators faced each other to seek closure to this long chapter of our horrendous past. Madiba knew that the scars inflicted on the majority of his people were real and permanent. Through centuries of colonialism and apartheid, black South Africans were deprived of their human dignity, were impoverished, lived in squalor, and denied meaningful economic opportunities. In his inauguration speech as first president of a democratic government, he declared, I quote, "Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all," unquote. In his State of the Nation address in May 1994, in this very house, at this very podium, he committed members of this parliament to be solely focused on passing legislation that would ensure that we create an enduring, inclusive, caring, people-centered society. Madiba declared that the purpose that will drive this government shall be the expansion of the frontiers of human fulfillment, the continuous extension of the frontiers of freedom. He said, I quote, "The acid test of the legitimacy of the programs we elaborate, the government institutions we create, the legislation we adopt must be whether they serve these objectives," unquote. For him, the objective of this parliament was to ensure a fair and equal treatment of all our people. This continues to guide the ANC's work and deeds in this house. We are nothing but servants of the people. We owe it to them to remain inspired by that single vision of creating a people-centered society. We continue to live by Madiba's counsel that at no time should this government and parliament become isolated from the people. It's because of our track record in government that the majority of South Africans have given the ANC an unequivocal mandate to expand the frontiers of human fulfillment. There may be hurdles, obstacles, and resistance, but we remain committed to ensuring that Parliament is an even better instrument of liberation in the hands of people who are confronted with unemployment, inequality, and poverty in this land of plenty. Madiba was very clear on what must constitute a human-centered society. He said, we need to de-racialize and democratize the economy and create jobs. He urged greater participation of the financial institutions in supporting black economic empowerment and the development of small business. He committed his government to wholeheartedly serve the poor, the oppressed, the wretched, and the despised. Under Nelson Mandela, he prioritized the delivery of basic services, like the provision of clean water, proper sanitation, health care, housing, electrification, and education. We can say it without hesitation that over the last 2 decades, we have made great strides in achieving these objectives and in bringing dignity to those who were previously excluded, oppressed, and marginalized. Madiba taught us that overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. It is a protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life, unquote. It is for this reason that he insisted that this parliament and our courts must guarantee the political and the human rights of all our citizens. He urged that our endeavors be about the liberation of the woman, the emancipation of the man, and the liberty of the child. It remains our collective responsibility together here and duty to ensure that women are empowered to participate in all facets of life as equals with men. Women's emancipation must be the central focus of the programs and daily activities of the public service. He championed the education and skilling of South Africans because he saw these as a way to increase one's chances of success in life. Armed with education, our youth could be at the center of our country's reconstruction and development. The people-centered society he envisaged would be mindful that there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way it treats its own children. His visionary, inclusive, and even-handed leadership constituted the blocks on which our democracy has been built. Under his leadership, our country established viable, independent and enduring institutions to strengthen constitutional democracy, and that we should protect at all times. Deputy Speaker, our democracy works. The principle of separation of powers stands firm. The rule of law prevails. Our public discourse is vibrant, sometimes noisy, sometimes rowdy. We are a government of the people, by the people. From their will, we will derive legitimacy. As their servants, we account to them. As it was in 1994, our task remains that of expanding the frontiers of human fulfillment and extending the frontiers of freedom. We are about creating an egalitarian, socially inclusive human society. In conclusion, as we recall the life and contribution of Madiba, we all need to ask ourselves whether our aims, programs, and conduct is passing the litmus test of creating a better life, not for some, but for all our people. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Lekota.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Fellow South Africans, the law betrayed Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, however, never betrayed the law. The legacy of Madiba rests squarely on his unshakable belief in the supremacy of the Constitution and his singular devotion to the rule of law. He humbly bowed before the law. He never arrogantly put himself above the law, nor did he crookedly bend the law for any nefarious purpose or self-gain. His legacy stands clean and unassailed. His selfless commitment to the nation started with his affirmation of the law. A president who seeks to serve the law serves the people selflessly. Therefore, with the Constitution in hand, he set about building a socially inclusive society. A president who seeks power for himself is selfish. A president who uses his office to enrich himself is corrupt. Nelson Mandela wanted neither. He gave himself to the people freely and without reserve. He was the people's president, not a president lording it over the people. Madiba wanted a better life for all and not for himself. He wanted a reconciled, united nation. He raised the moral bar very high and sustained it at that height. He envisioned a reconstruction and development program that would substantially change the lives of all the people and radically altered the hardened hearts of our fellow citizens. He wanted a happy and prosperous South Africa that would have the respect of the whole wide world. Because he was a creature of the law and a servant of the law, he concentrated his focus on serving the people. When he walked into this honorable house, the rafters shook with joyful songs of welcome. Governance without moral values and compassion is an abnegation of humanity. He stuck to moral values and compassion, and so he served his people selflessly. Madiba's legacy will last because his compassion and moral values infused his leadership and colored his words. The dedicated service he offered all of us and the love he engendered amongst all of us arose from his compassion, his moral values, and his regard for the rule of law. The Congress of the People does and will remain faithful to his vision. On International Mandela Day,
Honorable Lekota,
many good and ethically minded leaders here and abroad will seek to walk in Nelson Mandela's footsteps and do what is right, because they too will want to keep faith with their people and be encompassed
Honorable Member,
in their
your
love
time has
as
expired.
Nelson Mandela
Honorable
was.
Mishwe.
Long live the legacy of Madiba.
Deputy Speaker, sound values and good reasons to honor former President Mandela and to celebrate International Mandela Day include forgiveness, reconciliation, respect, unity, and nation building. Tata Mandela was a good listener and tolerant of the views and opinions of those who differed with his. In 1998, in response to his State of the Nation address, calling on the nation to firm up our moral fiber, I urged the former president to marry Mrs. Gracia Machel, with whom he had had a live-in relationship for some time. Instead of taking offense, Mr. Mandela recognized that my motivation was a desire to see him set a good example for young people, and he married the woman he loved on his 80th birthday a few months later. Although my appeal was based on my Christian convictions, he did not call me insulting names or accuse me of hate speech, as was the case recently for a young UCT student by the name of Zizi Popai. Deputy Speaker, it saddens me to see some communities in our nation becoming very intolerant. Shortly after the US Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriages in all states, Zizipo, who was a SRC deputy president, wrote on her personal Facebook page, quote, "We are institutionalizing and normalizing sin. May God have mercy on us," close quote. For this, she was called vile names, intimidated, her office was vandalized, and she was expelled from the SRC. This young Christian lady expressed her personal opinion on her own Facebook page. Shouldn't Christians have the right to express their belief or opinion just as of other people do? Ms. Pai's statement was not hate speech. She was expressing her belief that according to the Bible, fornication, homosexuality, prostitution, and adultery are all sins before God, a belief held by significant numbers of people living in South Africa. Christians in South Africa have a constitutional right to their belief and to express that belief. They should expect to be treated with the same respect and tolerance accorded to other citizens. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the ACDP and all who are concerned about the unfair treatment that Zizipo was subjected to, I want to convey my appreciation to Dr. Max Price, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, for the fair and professional manner in which he dealt with the expulsion of Ms. Pai from the SRC, which was found to be unlawful, procedurally unfair, and therefore invalid. In conclusion, I want to urge DA member Honorable Marius Riedelengees to apologize to Zizipo for what Cape Times Online said were, quote, a long series of mocking, insulting, and other pro-homosexual messages which amounted to harassment, close quote. As a member of parliament, he should know better than to demand the right to freedom of speech and expression while denying Zizipo the same right. To echo Zizipo's heartfelt prayer, may God have mercy on us. My heartfelt prayer is, may God have mercy on the leaders of our great country, South Africa. God bless you all.
Thank you. Honorable Gallo.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Perhaps as African Independent Congress, when contributing to this well-thought topic of the day, that is entrenching former President Nelson Mandela's legacy of dedicated and selfless service to building a socially inclusive society, allow us to begin by quoting from Max Dupree's book titled A Rumor of Spring, South Africa After 20 Years of Democracy. He says, I quote, Mandela gained his international reputation as a virtual saint after he facilitated the improbable transition from apartheid and white rule to an open democracy in 1994. But his role in reinvigorating and modernizing, in fact radicalizing the ANC from the 1950s onwards, also deserves mention. His role didn't stop when he went to jail in 1962.
He turned the jail on Robben Island into a disciplined political university where most future ANC leaders were educated. Perhaps that was one of the factors that distinguished the ANC from other liberation movements in Africa. That was the ANC of Utata Nelson Mandela, not this ANC today. In entrenching former President Nelson Mandela's legacy of dedicated and selfless service to building a socially inclusive society, the AIC would advise the ANC as a ruling party to do the right thing of handing over the power to the rightful owners, that is the people of this country. We must sincerely thank the old liberation movement for leading the liberation struggle all these years. However, the AIC is of the view that the time has come for the people of this country to enter into the third phase of the liberation struggle of claiming back the people's power from lumpen politicians. It doesn't need a rocket scientist to witness the fact that liberation movements have failed the people in all African countries. In South Africa, for instance, the latest statistics indicate that 21.7% of South Africans live in extreme poverty, not being able to pay for basic nutritional requirements. 37% of people don't have enough money to purchase both adequate food items and non-food items. So they have to sacrifice food to pay for things like transport and airtime. Yet we are having individuals here who are claiming to be true leaders of the people.
Honorable
What
Carlo,
a hypocrisy.
you have
I will conclude.
no time left, sir.
I will conclude by quoting Utatu Nelson Mandela. He said, I quote, when a man is denied the right to live the life he believes in, he has no choice but to become an outlaw. I thank
Honorable
you.
member, you have long lost your time. Honorable Ibrahim.
Deputy Speaker.
Yes, what are you raising on, Honorable Member?
I want to check if the honorable member will be able to take a question before he speaks.
No,
Answer.
I'm not prepared to take a question. Thank you. Deputy Speaker and
Honorable
members of
Ibrahim,
Parliament.
answer the man. He wants to know whether you will take a question. Just answer him.
No.
The answer is no, sir.
While
Proceed.
South Africans around the world celebrate Mandela's legacy, devoting 67 minutes of their time on his birthday as a result of on his birthday, we in South Africa must and should celebrate his legacy daily. Now, what is the significance of the 67 minutes? It has many significances, but I want to pick on two. First of all, it is to promote non-racialism, especially in an era of growing racial hatred and hate speech, even in the developed world. We witness growing racial hatred in places like the United States, where black churchgoers were shot dead by racist white youth, and Israeli settler violence against the Palestinians in the occupied territories, where recently a baby of 18 months old was burned alive to death by Israeli settlers. We have seen the racism, we've seen racism in our own country of late. Mandela's message is more relevant today than when he walked out of prison. Secondly, 67 minutes symbolizes peace. As a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize and having worked for peace in his own country, Mandela's message to the world is that there can be no military solution to human conflict. This is more relevant today as the world descends into brutal and barbaric conflict. Consider the bombing of Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Libya. Mandela's message of peace is of great relevance today. One of the important legacies of Madiba was his belief that all conflicts can and should be resolved peacefully through negotiation, reconciliation, and compromise. Today, South Africans are asked to share our experience on negotiation, reconciliation, and constitution making in many parts of the world where there is conflict. We move from Colombia to Colombo, from Madagascar to Myanmar, from Somalia to Syria. At home, it is thanks to Madiba, among others, that we have democratic institutions in this country, including this democratic parliament. Mandela has always maintained that whatever he achieved was through a collective leadership and efforts of many of his comrades. We should also remember leaders and close comrades of Madiba, such as Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, Brown Fisher, Joe Slovo, Yusuf Dadu, and many, many others. Madiba was an ANC leader, and his teaching and spirit lives today with the African National Congress. Madiba emerged as a political leader of the ANC during the Second World War, which witnessed the terrible atrocities of Nazism and fascism. He emerged during the anti-colonial struggle, which, starting in Asia, snowballed into Africa. Madiba was in the same league of anti-colonial leaders, such as Nehru and Gandhi, Ho Chi Minh and Mao Zedong, of Fidel Castro, Gamal Abdel Nasser, of Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, and many others. His internationalism led to the ANC supporting those struggling for peace and freedom around the world. On his release from prison, he declared his support for the Palestinian struggle, saying, "The freedom of South Africa would not be complete without the freedom of the Palestinian." He also declared his support for the people of Sahrawi and called on the United States to negotiate with Cuba and to lift the economic embargo. Not only did Madiba support the struggle of the people of East Timor, but he persuaded President Suharto of Indonesia to allow a referendum in that territory, which eventually led to his independence. With regard to Libya, Madiba was concerned about the Lockerbie affair and the resultant sanctions against Libya. He persuaded Colonel Gaddafi to allow the Lockerbie suspect to stand trial. On Burundi, he played a central role in the Arusha peace process that steered the country towards a peaceful resolution to the conflict in that country. The group of elders which was initiated by Madiba is an excellent example of how Mandela sought to contribute to world peace. At home, Madiba always believed in consultation and in collective leadership with his comrades and members of the African National Congress before he took any major decision. When Madiba came back from Africa in 1962, he taught the country while underground to consult with his comrades. In KwaZulu-Natal, he even consulted with the Congress Youth Leagues. When we were in prison on Robben Island and Mandela was a prisoner in Victor Verster, he would call some of us from Robben Island to inform us of negotiations he was having with the apartheid government. He sought the views of even prisoners and their approval of what he was doing. When visiting him on Victor Verster, he said, "We must never compromise on the question of majority rule in South Africa, but we should also address the fears and concerns of white minority." On release from prison, these principles guided Madiba and his organization, the African National Congress, that in establishing a democratic, non-racial, non-sexist South Africa, we must also choose the path of reconciliation and avoid seeking revenge against those who had oppressed us. Mandela believed in the unity of our nation, and while he extended his hands of reconciliation to those who practiced the racist system of apartheid, Mandela knew that the road ahead for a prosperous South Africa was a difficult one. The economic crisis today requires from us as a nation united action and the need for sacrifice. We should not sacrifice social cohesion, for Mandela wanted us to build this land as a united democratic South Africa. Today, our country is faced with an attack on its democratic institution, including this parliament, and the country at large is faced with economic and development challenges. At this juncture, it is imperative that we rededicate ourselves to what Madiba fought for. The struggle must be to maintain our democratic parliament and other institutions, and to fiercely struggle against action that damage South Africa's integrity. Our democratic parliament must not allow a distance to develop between us in parliament and the people whom we are supposed to serve. Madiba wanted this parliament to be a truly people's parliament, and as a dedication to him, we need to uphold the dignity of this institution and make it a truly people's parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Mbinda.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker and honorable members. Speaker, the PAC takes great pleasure in entering this debate. We do not enter this debate from a cult point of view. The PAC distances itself from the personal cult culture. The danger of the cult is that extreme admiration blinds the mind, thus shutting down the vision. Hence, the PAC totally rejects any form of personal cult building, and we must say that this Mandela cult has blocked the national vision. Just look at the NDP to see the lack of vision. Never mind the corruption and the looting of the national treasury that confirms that we indeed have lost the vision. Speaker, in 2009, the Secretary General of the UN said that Mandela embodies the United Nations' highest value. This statement attracts the attention of the PAC to ask itself, what are the values of the UN? It is common cause that in its preamble, the UN portrays itself as an entity that is against the sorrow of war, violation of human rights, impediment to social progress, and obstacle to freedom. That preamble of the United Nations Charter sounds very noble. Besides, it can be factually argued that this republic benefited from this preamble, as it normally argued that we owe Mandela our freedom. Unfortunately, Speaker, facts talks otherwise. The problem of the UN lies in its conceptualization of the human program and the cause of human suffering. It is in the same vein that the PAC differs with Mandela's conceptualization of the reason for the war of liberation. Mandela's legacy is no different. A lot of good things written about freedom and democracy, but the practical experience of African people do not reflect a nation that enjoys the right to self-determination. This is because of the conceptualization of the struggle that Mandela preached directly from the Freedom Charter. African people in their great numbers live in squatter camps and squalor. Unemployment in the African community runs over 50%. In fact, in spite of the massaged figures of 25%, the experience of crime and insecurity is of untold proportion under this legacy, which is said to be beautiful. The PAC would like to use this debate to truly celebrate the generation of men and women which Mandela belonged to, as they are the real conceptualizers of the struggle for sovereignty, for land repossession, and economic self-determination.
that generation, the likes of Umzwakhe Limbethe, AP Mda, Umamusobukwe, Umutuping,
Regrettably,
Utambo,
Honorable Member, your time has expired.
Umasemula, and many others that have sacrificed for the liberation of mankind.
Thank you. Honorable Atkinson.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Quite a few interesting comments from the Speaker before. I don't really think you can hold Mandela responsible for the fact that people live in squatter camps at the moment. I think the blame for that lies on the other side completely, and it's 20 years on, so I don't think you can really hold Mandela responsible for that. Mr. Deputy Speaker, honourable members, and the Mandela family. Earlier this week, a long-serving member of the National Assembly pointed out to me that there are only about 14 members left in this House who have served the country since 1994. Consequently, there are few here now who have experienced the excitement and hope generated by our transition to democracy firsthand. At almost exactly the same time that our democratic elections took place in April 1994, and not very far from us, a terrible genocide was unfolding in Rwanda. Hundreds of thousands of people were slaughtered at a rate that even exceeded the death of Jewish people in the German Holocaust 50 years earlier. The difference between our two experiences could not have been starker, and it led the Nobel Prize-winning African writer Wole Soyinka to observe in 1994 that Rwanda is our nightmare, South Africa is our dream. It is in recognition of that African dream led by President Nelson Mandela and his policy of reconciliation leading to the extraordinary changes in our country that the United Nations established International Mandela Day. It is on this day that each individual is called upon to carry out 67 minutes of selfless service as a way of adding to that better society envisaged by President Mandela. On the day of his inauguration, President Mandela said, "Our daily deeds as ordinary South Africans must produce an actual South African reality that will reinforce humanity's belief in justice, strengthen its confidence in the nobility of the human soul, and sustain our hopes for a glorious life for all." It is a subject of today's debate that we should be building a socially inclusive society as a means of entrenching President Mandela's legacy of dedicated and selfless service. What does this actually all mean in reality? A fine goal, but how do we give it practical effect? It is impossible to divorce the goal of a socially inclusive society from that of economic inclusivity. If you have neither a job nor the resources to provide for your family, it is very difficult to feel that you're part of a society around you. Unemployment for many poor South Africans is exacerbated by poor service delivery. The thousands of service delivery protests that this country now faces every month could not be a more potent symbol of those feelings of exclusion, both economic and social, that many of our citizens now face. The experience of many of our people is not the glorious life that President Mandela envisioned in 1994, but a distant and unhelpful government. The distance of this government from the South African people and its unhelpfulness to the poor and those seeking employment was best captured by Minister Gagaba's response yesterday in the House. And I thank him for being here as almost the sole member of the Cabinet to give tribute to Mandela. In responding to comments about the negative effect his new visa regulations are having on the tourism industry, he framed the problem of job losses caused in the tourism industry as a balance between the protection of children from child trafficking and profits made in the tourism industry. What completely escaped Minister Gagaba were the thousands of people who will now be put out of work through the visa regulation changes and their economic exclusion from our society. Has he taken into account the rights of the children of parents who are about to be thrown out of work for them to have a better life and for them to feel included in our society? For many of our poorer citizens, their feelings of inclusion or exclusion from our society can only be gauged from their interactions with government. All too often they experience officialdom that is unhelpful and disinterested, and more often than not, they see their politicians racing around in blue light convoys. If you want a symbol of social exclusion in our society, there is no more powerful example than that of the high-speed blue light convoys so beloved of many ANC politicians. As I mentioned earlier, President Nelson Mandela laid out a vision of South Africa as a rainbow nation, where all should feel included. Through increasing prosperity, citizens should be able to find work and lead a better life for them and their families. You could say his vision is encapsulated in 3 words: freedom, fairness, and opportunity. Much of the hope that President Mandela had for South Africa in 1994 is captured in the DA's new policy known as Vision 2029. The DA is fully committed to creating a society where all people feel included, both socially and economically. A prosperous economy under a DA government will provide jobs for citizens who will then be able to support their families. They will also be supported by a capable state, providing better education, health and protection, which will be built on their tax rands, but they will also be there to assist them in times of need. There is no greater way for a citizen to feel part of the society they live in than to be able to contribute to its growth and to experience real and proper value for their services. I'd like to end by paraphrasing a quote from President Mandela when he said, "True heroes are those who build and make peace and not to break down and destroy." Let us all commit ourselves to building a better and more inclusive society that will herald the glorious future envisaged in 1994. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Honorable members, that concludes the debate in the business of the day. Honorable members, it's a mistake. Honorable Mandela. My apologies, honorable members.
Jengel, uzawufuneka uDeputy Speaker adliwe inkomo izise phaa komkhulu. Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members, members of the media, comrades and friends, and particularly to our special guests, the future leaders of our country seated in the gallery. Madiba was born in a tiny village of Mvezo Komkhulu to becoming a global icon. You too, seated in the gallery, you can become such a leader. On this occasion of the International Mandela Day, let me say that Nelson Mandela was a personification of the ANC, his political home, his movement, his strength, and source of collective wisdom. I am afraid, though, however, that he would not want to claim so special a position for himself and would have deferred all credit to our victories, to his upbringing, his elders, and those who carried the mantle of the ANC leadership before him. He transcended beyond all classes, sexual and racial boundaries, a true product of the South African society. In a recent interview, his longtime friend and lawyer, George Bezos, said, I quote, "He is, after all, a man who, without saying so, showed every sign from the early 50s when I first met him that he was a man of destiny. He would not show any sign that was not correct. He is not an egotist. I have hardly ever heard him, when discussing political matters, say I. It is always we, or my organization, or the liberation movement, as if he cannot afford to be seen to suffer from any human weakness. So I proceed this afternoon by tempering my trepidation for saying he is a personification of the ANC by saying that Madiba and others of his generation, like Tata and Mama Sisulu, Governor Mbeki, Andrew Mlangeni, Ahmad Katrada, on this month of women, let me acknowledge the women who walked side by side with Madiba, such as Helen Joseph, Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and Mama Lillian Ngoyi, Mama Ruth, who like him are personification of the ANC. Individually and collectively, they embodied the qualities of its culture, tradition, and values. It is in this collective sense alone that I can escape Tata Madiba's opprobrium. There is no shadow of doubt that he spoke fondly of we, my organization, or the liberation movement. Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, those on the other side of the House have in recent years been clamoring to claim and surreptitiously usurp my grandfather's legacy, despite representing everything diametrically opposed to what he stood for and his opposition to neo-colonial project. They must have suffered a terrible bout of the blues when he affirmed that when he went to the afterlife, he would be joining the nearest branch of the ANC or opening a new one himself. Honorable Ntate Maimane in absentia, take note that even in the afterlife, Madiba continues and remains a loyal cadre to the ANC. Deputy Speaker, the former President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, Nkosi Dalpunga, may have been born into the Mandela family, but his political home was the ANC, from which he learned the indelible lesson of deferring to the collective wisdom of your elders and those who have gone before you. This was to have a lifelong impact on the young Madiba and influence his collective style of leadership. Honorable members, from the ANC School of Wisdom, he also learned that nothing worthy in life is ever achieved without revolutionary discipline and adherence to organizational values, traditions, and culture. Regardless of the harshness of indignity meted out by the brutal apartheid state, they learned in the ANC the value of dignified self-respect. Kaniyeke ukuyihlaza nokuyithoba isidima lendlu ebekekileyo nesizwe ngokubanzi saseMzantsi Afrika malungu ahloniphekileyo. Even in the heat of debate, decent and vehement disagreements in the ANC, Nkosi Dalpunga learned and throughout his life demonstrated that the key differentiator in a war of attrition is the intellectual capacity that enables a mature reading and analysis of the situation, an appropriate and well thought through response, and refined ability to consider all possibilities and options. Thus could he out to shake the hand, thus he could reach out to shake the hand of our former President de Klerk, although in the moment he felt betrayed. Honorable members, Madiba also learned that in the ANC, a great value is placed on self-criticism and the ability to reflect on one's own position, course of action, and willingness to take stock of where we may have made tactical errors or violated the decorum, protocols, and values germane to our African culture, such as respect for elders. Ndike ndikusizele Nkosi Buthelezi xa uhleli apho ungxolelwa ngeentsuku zonke ungeva nento eqhubekayo apha endlini. Some in this parliament would do well to reflect upon their behavior and realize that they cannot simply behave as they wish in the presence of elders and veterans of this house, as I've said, such as Nkosi Buthelezi and the Honorable Groenewald and others. Deputy Speaker, South African liberation recalled the heroic acts of ordinary South Africans driven by only the motive to serve the cause of liberation and the revolutionary vanguard of the people's struggle. In this respect, Nkosi Dalpunga was a tireless warrior who fought for the very right to serve the cause. Regardless of the position that he served, he always regarded himself as a subject of the people. His sole life purpose was to serve and be of service in fulfilling the aspirations of the people. This is diametrically opposed to a popular view that regard the people as subjects whose raison d'etre is to serve and be of service to those in power. Nkosi Dalpunga imbibed the highest level of commitment to the cause of social upliftment because he understood that the movement was founded upon the principle of social upliftment and working together for a better life for all. He at all times always demonstrated the highest respect for a parliament he regarded as representing the will of the people. He regarded the corridors of this hallowed house as sacrosanct, as it was an expression of those who were not there to express themselves on day-to-day issues, but who spoke through their representatives. Today, unfortunately, there are those who have adopted this space for political grandstanding and promoting their personal political careers and ambitions. Rather than talking to the inspiration to our nation, continent, and global community that Madiba continues to inspire. Deputy Speaker, the declaration in November 2009.
Yes, Honorable Member. Take a seat, Honorable Member.
Can the Honorable Member, with all due respect, take a question?
Honorable Member.
Kawukulinde ndigqiba uthetha. Uyabuya ubuze umbuzo wakho xa sendigqibile uthetha.
All right, proceed.
Deputy Speaker, the declaration in November 2009 by the UN on International Nelson Mandela Day on July 18 bears testimony to the stature of the man as a global icon and a disciplined cadre of the movement whose very life is committed to improving the condition of the people and encouraging a spirit of volunteerism, no matter how small or large. One may well ask whether Madiba would have risen without the ANC, whether the rough diamond in the making would have been polished and well-rounded, balanced and refined, individual without the mentoring of comradeship of the likes of Tata Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Oliver Tambo, and others in the leadership echelon of the ANC. Nkosi Dalpunga demonstrated his commitment to finding the formula for mentoring and developing the leadership cadres of the ANC, especially since he understood that the success of the movement depended upon the ability of the ANC to groom successive generations of leadership dedicated to the cause of the people and the sole determinant of its future direction, policy perspectives, and organizational program. Honorable members, allow me to conclude with the words of Isitwalandwe Andrew Mlangeni, who shared a neighboring cell with Nkosi Dalpunga for much of their incarceration. He said, I quote, "Madiba would never die because the ideals of freedom, human dignity, respect for individuals, food and shelter for all humankind that he represented would be carried forward by generations to come. Let us recommit ourselves to a lifelong struggle of promoting our country and flying the South African flag high. Let's recommit ourselves to Madiba's program of national unity and nation building." I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Members,
Deputy Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Member.
The Honorable Member has undertaken to answer my question just at this point in time.
Yeah.
Can I put the question to him?
No, and his time is over. So yours is also not applicable.
So he was disingenuous.
Honorable members, it is appropriate now to conclude the debate and the business of the day. The House is adjourned.